So I moved to Mississippi in 1982 for a job. I came from St. Louis.
How old were you?
Well, I just had graduated. I was a year out of graduation from college. So I'm guessing I was 20, something like that.
22, 23, because it need to take 5 years going to college.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways, to
So
set the
you're
stage.
you're better at that than I am engaging that. And I had to move to Jackson, Mississippi, which I wasn't real happy with. As it was, I wasn't the greatest with the thought of being in sales either. That was not, as I went to college, I went through the same channels my brothers did because I didn't know any better what to do. So I came out with, I think, a marketing degree, business administration degree, and went into sales. The company that I worked for moved me down to Jackson. First, they were going to move me to Memphis, which I thought was okay. But then last minute they decided to send me to Jackson, Mississippi, which I thought was going deep south and into anyway, I got into Jackson and it was a very kind of behind the times based on living in St. Louis. So I was not really happy. And I didn't have any friends there. I didn't know anybody there. And I traveled a lot. So I was gone many times from Monday through Thursday or Sunday through Thursday every week, except maybe 1 week a month, I'd be home doing work in that territory. So I was kind of miserable.
Didn't really have an opportunity to meet people because you were
Yeah.
on the road, you weren't working in an office.
And so as I did this, I just got myself kind of sick over it, literally sick, dehydrated, and it just kept getting worse. And it was mainly because I was angry, I think. I was depressed. And so one trip going out, I think I'm going to Mobile, Alabama as part of my journey. And I was heading down through Mississippi and I started to really feel bad. I thought I was going to literally pass out in the car as I was driving. And I saw a hospital sign and I pulled off. The next exit happened to be the hospital, as coincidence would be. And I literally took myself into the emergency room and told them what was going on and and I was nearly at a fainting point then. They got me hooked up with an IV and got me feeling better. Like I said, a lot of it was dehydration, but the bigger part, it was the mental part of just being depressed and just angry about life, that it was unfair or whatever. And I left that hospital and I continued on my journey to Mobile. I had a long talk with myself in the car, and I came to the conclusion that all I was doing was hurting myself by being so angry and so mad at the fact that I lived in Jackson, Mississippi and had no friends, all of that. And I made the decision that I was going to do it differently, that I was going to turn things around. I was where I was at. There wasn't anything I was going to be able to do about it at that very point. And instead of being mad and angry about it, I was going to try to enjoy life a little bit and make some friends. And that one trip, that one moment changed everything. Because when I got back, I ended up joining a Catholic singles group there. I started looking for a job because I did want to get out of Jackson. I wasn't, it just wasn't a great town for a single person to live in, or anyway. And I did. I got a new job. I met a lot of friends there, which it did make leaving kind of tough because then I had made good friends there. But as it turned out, I had like 3 or 4 really good friends, and we all departed at the same time. It was this, I don't, divine intervention or whatever you want to call it. But Dale and Jody moved to California. My friend Kathy moved to Chicago and got married. And one of my other friends departed somewhere else too. I can't remember where that was. So we all left at the same time. So I did leave a few people behind that were friends, but it really made a difference. And it was change that was, it was a kind of not a double-edged sword. but it was kind of tough, but happy at the same time because
Bittersweet.
yeah, because you have whenever you make change, it can be challenging and difficult emotionally and even physically. But at the same time, it felt really good because I got a raise, I got a new job, I moved to a new town. Um, so it was good. It was a neat experience that and it kind of goes back to my idea that we have contrast in our life that's necessary. It took me to get sick to turn things around and change things. And, I probably wouldn't have if I'd been halfway happy or something with there. I probably wouldn't have changed and I needed it.
Or had not gotten that sick,
Yeah.
that would have led you down that. And what I hear when you're telling that story is acceptance. You came to accept where you're at and what you had.
Yeah. Home is where the heart is.
And that new job, is that what brought you to Charlotte?
Yes.
Which is where we met.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
I'm glad you had that heart talk with yourself and that hospital happened to be there. I'm curious if the doctor said something to you that was sort of a wake-up call for you.
I don't know that I remember, to tell you the honest truth. Probably did.
Someone, guess, starring.
Well, what was interesting too is I was moving to Charlotte, North Carolina, where we live now, and I could have swore I was going to go further south and deeper south, and it was going to be, Charlotte. Oh, darling, Charlotte. I had my mint julep and sit on the porch.
Do it.
No, yeah. Well, I wanted to get out of Mississippi, and I wanted to get away from the boss I had at the time. So there was a lot to it.
This is Gina.
And this is Don.
With Focused Healthy Family. This is podcast number 73. And today we're talking about change. But before we get into that, let's hear a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor is Q Sciences. I've been a representative for Q Sciences for over a year. I found this company through a friend and did some research and reading about these products. And I really liked what I found when I learned about them. The research and time that they've put into the quality of these products to be better absorbed into the body. Things like the vitamin D spray. Our youngest was on a capsule vitamin D, and yet vitamin D levels remained the same with follow-up checkups. And with the spray, it increased. Pretty
strong.
Almost double.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're talking her levels were maybe 20. And I want to say they went up to 47 or something around that range. And the sleep spray is another great one. It's got melatonin, 5-HTP, and I believe another herbal supplement in there. And because it's a spray, you spray it on your tongue, it gets absorbed more quickly into your body to be more effective to help you in the moment. We're using the B12 spray. We've used the vitamin C spray. They have a Q Max product, which is a multivitamin.
And they also have the CBD, different, a variety of different.
It's full spectrum hemp oils. Yes. They even have a THC-free version. It comes in different flavors. There is a mushroom.
Oh, yeah.
Armor. It's called Q Armor. It's a powder, and I get the chai flavor. Put it in my chai tea for a double chai drink.
So instead of, as they say, flushing your supplements down, the toilet or the drain, you want to get something like this that's fully absorbed. It's like flushing money down the toilet too, if you're not using a supplement that absorbs well and does well for your body. So that's what Q Science is really about. It's a good, well absorbed, high nutrient product.
They have multiple products. They have child specific products. They now also have some facial cream products. I've been using a night cream to minimize the effects of sunlight and stress and aging on my skin. And they have a hemp lotion. That's also a wonderful product that we've tried. So check us out, learn more. You can find the link at our website,
www.focusedhealthyfamily.com. You can also go to focusedhealthyfamily.com/Q Sciences, the letter Q and Sciences.
With an S at the end.
With the S at the end, yes. And we're back.
Talking about change. I love your story, Don, and just how all those little things bring you to where you are. I brought up my curiosity of what was it that the doctor at the emergency room might have said to you that sparked you having that heart-to-heart talk with yourself.
I'm sure they probably told me I couldn't keep going the way I was going because it wasn't helpful.
Like they probably let you know you're dehydrated, and how it's affecting you, and you could have been in a car accident. So many other things could have happened that would have caused.
Oh yeah, I would have passed out.
It would have been quite the 2x4.
Yeah.
I'd like to kick off our discussion. I still don't know what I was looking for, and my time was running wild. A million dead-end streets. Every time I thought I'd got it made, it seemed the taste was not so sweet. So I turned myself to face me, but I've never caught a glimpse of how the others must see the faker. I'm much too fast to take that test. Changes.
Turn and face the change.
Don't want to be a richer one. Just gonna have to be a different one. Time may change me, but I can't trace time.
Is that David Bowie? Is that?
It is.
Yeah.
Of course it is.
The Bowie man.
And the lyrics of that.
Poster. The posterina.
Okay. You're channeling your 80s dude.
I don't know. Polarama.
That's my generation.
So we're going through it right now. What you had a little bit of a story about change too, didn't you?
Yes, unlike you that grew up in St. Louis and lived there your whole life, and so that was like your first move. I was born in New Jersey. When I was 2, we moved to Ohio. My dad finally graduated. He went to night school for years while working and raising a family, and then we were in Ohio for 8 years, and then each job was kind of like a promotion, kind of moving up and shifting. We moved to Pittsburgh, then we moved to Whitehall, Pennsylvania. And so I grew up with moving. And so when I graduated college, I wanted to move somewhere. I had been in a long relationship and we had split up, and I really was not happy with the area we were living in. It always felt a little backwards to me. We moved from one side of Pennsylvania.
Texas, Mississippi. Talk about backward. No, sorry.
We moved from one side of Pennsylvania to the other, and things were so different. It felt like a different world. And it was an area where people had lived there their whole life. And so new people coming in, it was like, oh, it's the new kid. Versus when I moved to Pittsburgh, and I was younger, I was 9 versus being 12, almost 13. So I knew that was something I could do. And so after I finished school and my internship as an OT, I started researching. I actually went to the library and pulled almanacs and found the cities that were the sunniest. I wanted to live where it was sunny and warm. And yes, in 1992, you didn't really have the internet to go researching on. You went to the library and you pulled out an almanac. And I know Denver came up and Charlotte. And I want to say Cincinnati, Ohio. Somehow those were the 3 cities on my radar that I remember. And at the time, I've got the American Journal of Occupational Therapy. These OT magazines was where I was finding jobs and looking at them. And I reached out to people. I know there was definitely places in Ohio. Can't remember about Denver and Charlotte. Well, apparently Charlotte and North Carolina had the biggest need for therapists because they were willing to fly me down here to interview me and put me up with a place to stay. I remember when I reached out in Ohio, they're like, well, the next time you're in the area, let us know. And I'm like, oh, no, here I am, 22, almost 23, young and cocky and full of life and ready to take on the world. And well, North Carolina was willing to fly me down. I even had the boldness that I looked at jobs in several different cities across North Carolina over a good kind of radius area.
Well, your sister lived in Raleigh at the
My
time
sister
too.
lived in Raleigh. And so from Raleigh to Charlotte is 3 hours, and Winston-Salem's
About 2.
2 hours, kind of, it makes a big triangle. North Carolina's a very long state. And so I set up interviews in multiple places. And I remember, I believe it was the job in Charlotte. They just wanted to get me a two-way ticket, to Charlotte and back home. And I was like, listen, I'm not going to fly back home. I'm going to interview all over. So you can pay for that and I won't use the other half. I was very cocky. And at the time there was such a need
Still is.
that it was to my advantage that they were desperately in need of therapists. So I somehow coordinated with several different companies that I was interviewing at, that I flew to Charlotte, then I flew to Raleigh. The place in Winston-Salem got me a rental car so that I drove out there. I just had this all coordinated. And I didn't have to pay for it. They paid for places for me to stay. In Raleigh, I stayed with my sister. And it was an adventure, an experience. And
we're recording, sweetie.
She told me to come down with it. It's okay. As we always tell people, parenting comes first.
That's right.
And so my
little interruption there
from our child is okay. So where were we?
You were talking about they paid for your trip and all that, and you were cocky, as she still is.
And I was jumping at this opportunity to move. And after being in college and living on campus at a small school for 4 years, and just that camaraderie, when you move in a dorm, you're hanging out with these people, it's like a big party, you get to know each other real easily. And so I moved to an apartment in Charlotte. I did all the fun trips, finding a car with my dad and the apartment with my mom. And I got here diving in. I remember one of my fellow students from college, we did an internship at the same location. She's like, you just can't do that. You just can't pick up and move. And I'm like, why not? At the time, I got a car that gave me a 6-month deferral, because I showed I was a college graduate and I had a job. I didn't have to start making a payment right away. My parents helped me out, and I helped, pay them back for some things because you don't have a paycheck right away. And yet I jumped into this, and I remember moving into my apartment going, okay, people are going to come knock on the door and introduce themselves to me. And I allowed myself a week before I started work so that I could get adjusted. Well, what I didn't realize was I'm there all by myself. Mm-hmm. I'm alone for a week in a new place. And it's not a college dorm, and people aren't just knocking on my door.
But I remember you telling you thought people would, though. I think you had this idea that they would come with welcoming arms and casseroles.
Efforts, because there was somebody who taught like aerobics at the fitness center in the apartment complex, and I joined in on that. And I had met people when I had come to Charlotte and interviewed. I connected with people there and other young adults like myself. We had gone out afterwards. I had gotten a phone number of the one person, and
was it Rhonda? Is that
yeah. About calling her when I was there, and I didn't quite do that yet, being kind of the shy, not the one who takes the initiative, but who easily joins in when invited by other people. And so that first week was a little tough. Yet once I got going to work and into things and getting to go visit my sister, who was a good 3 hours away, I took a big leap.
Yeah.
And because I grew up the way I did, it didn't sound so crazy. Now looking at it, I'm like, wow, I can't imagine. Our daughter took off and moved 3 hours away, and that's a huge leap for her. And
when we take, when we think about talking about leaps, we've done a lot of leaping. We getting pregnant, with first time, we looked at it kind of goes to this idea, you can't wait till all the lights are green.
Yeah, you had started your own business. We had all this planned, that you'd have a business from home, because I could make good money even part-time, and I'd go back to work, and because we decided we didn't really just want to put our child in daycare, that we wanted to be there and involved. And we made this whole plan, and you were growing your business, and everyone thought we'd wait a little longer till your business, because you weren't really generating income yet. And we said, I remember talking to you about what age, because you were 38 when our first child was born. And I remember you wanted to wait 5 years when we got married before we had a kid. And then you started I kind of pointed out to you, calculating how old you'd be.
Well, yeah, I was at 38. This was my first child, but if I look back at my father, I was the last child and he was 38 when I was born.
Was it 38 or 39?
Well, right around that age. Anyway, but it was just, he had already had 6 kids by the age of 38. So is that interesting? But well, and we've taken leaps in a lot of different ways. We moving into the house. We decided when we were living at that house I had bought to take the leap, even though it probably affordability at the time wasn't, the best.
Well, what we decided to do was rent the house. We had met other people who rented out houses. They bought a house, they fixed it up, they rented it, and they acquired rental property, and it was a great source of income. And we really liked that idea. And we discovered that we could afford another house based on the rent income we could make at our current house. And we could get something a little bit bigger. And it was sort of because I was working less hours to be with our child more, our income was lower than it had been. And so it was a way for us to step up and to have a little more space.
Yeah.
And it was, the plan was we'd be there for 5 years. And I don't know if we even thought about like turning this into a rental property. We kind of saw ourselves acquiring rental properties.
So change is about risk in a way. I think just about any change is kind of, it has some kind of a risk factors to it.
Stepping out of your comfort zone.
But then you have to think about the fact of, if you don't do something, what are if we didn't move at the time, what would have happened, and I think even though it was challenging because the rental didn't go as well as we had hoped it would.
Yeah, it wound up.
It ended up costing us quite a bit.
But that was because 9/11 happened. We didn't, and then the rental market slowed down. Yeah. People were buying houses instead of renting. Change happens. We can't predict for that. And yet I'm glad we took the leap.
Oh yeah, because going back to that neighborhood, and unfortunately for them, it had started to go down even as we were. I think that was another reason we decided to change was, remember, they were building that whole section on the back that was.
And unfortunately then a year and a half or so later, when we chose to sell it, because realizing renting it was not going to be as lucrative as we had hoped.
We
kind of took a little bit of,
we didn't take a loss, but we didn't. Well, we had used some of the equity in it to invest into this house.
Right. And
so change comes with risk, but it's a necessary risk, I think, in a way.
Some people say, I think it's the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I've seen this quote used with children. If you're saying the same things over and over again with your kids and you're expecting them to do something different, maybe the problem isn't them, maybe it's you and how you're doing things.
Yeah.
So change is a big focus of where we're at in our lives personally right now, because we decided to look at ways to consolidate some debt. And one way we researched a bunch of different things was selling. There's right now in the market in 2023 in Charlotte, North Carolina area, home values have gone way up. This is a place where people are moving into. There's companies now that will buy your home and fix it up for you, and you don't have to go through the hassle of fixing it up to list it and sell it and all the showings. And so we thought, let's just find out. We're getting all these messages. We'll buy your house. We knew we're in a desirable area. And let's just see. And we did. And the first company, the offer took forever and it was a little low and they didn't get back to us. And then the next company was like, oh, wow.
And I don't think we need to do advertising for them necessarily by who they are. Do we? I don't know.
We can find out if they'd like to advertise with us, and then we will. So it kind of leaped us forward. It was kind of a curiosity. We were looking at different options. And then we decided, okay, we're going to do this. And that's a big decision. We have lived here for 22 years. We've always I always joke that it was our 5-year house, and yet we've had a mortgage payment that was under $1,000 for years, and it's gone up a little more than that. And yet that's afforded us, to me, to work part-time, and you to grow a business, and us to be home with our kids. They're choices that we made to not have a lot of expenses. Because this area has grown, we've been able to refinance the house and take the equity to do upgrades, to do things that needed to be done. And it's also been, I'm realizing now as we're looking around, it's been a great place to live. As the area's grown and they built our outer beltway, we live within 5 minutes from this beltway that loops around the county. And so we can get a lot of different places. Like in half an hour, we can be in a lot of different places. And it's an ideal location. And we love that it's kind of an older neighborhood with trees. We haven't connected, like our kids, because they were homeschooled, we didn't connect a lot as far as our kids growing up with friendships. Kids have made a couple of friends, and yet it's felt safe and comfortable. And so as we're looking at moving in other areas, we're realizing what we like about this area, the things we do like about it. And it has afforded us this nice place. Our kids have grown up here, and it's all they've known. And I know for a time when we talked about moving, it was overwhelming, especially to our kids with anxiety disorders, that was just overwhelming to them. Well, now the youngest is on board and eager for something new, eager for change, eager for different things. Young teenage years, that's kind of all about that, testing the boundaries and the limits.
Go ahead.
We've thrown ourselves into something new. And so we have change in a lot of different areas.
So I was going to talk about like how to handle change. What can you do? And a couple of thoughts come to mind is, with what we did is, first is you do some research. You don't, the problem with that is you don't want to overthink, but you also want to research the possibilities. Once you've researched the possibilities, then it's really, I think, following the heart and how your gut feeling about it is very important. Decisions. Yeah, because otherwise you could get stuck in just this loop of I don't know if it's going to work, and undecisiveness. The other thing I was going to, like, if you're dealing with a teen that is not happy about it, is really listening, and this goes back to our communication skills, but really listening to what they have to say. Not saying that you have to bow down to them and not make the change, but
meet them where they are.
Meet them where they are first, and listen to, at least let them be heard about what their opposition is to it.
Because a lot of times it's more about that being heard. They might say, no, I'm not doing that. Absolutely not. And if they dig their heels in and you dig your heels in back, you're just going to get into a power struggle. But it might be more about that they want to feel heard.
Well, and then you can also use, like, we do problem solving to talk about how we can resolve some of the issues that they're coming up with. It might be leaving a boyfriend or a girlfriend.
I remember that.
And that can be
angry when we moved.
That can be very, so, you might be able to find ways of connecting them, whether they do Zoom calls, whether they plan trips back and forth or whatever.
Back up a minute.
Yeah.
Not that we have to fix it.
Yeah.
Maybe you've lost a job and you have to move for whatever reason, and there are pros and cons. And sometimes you're in a position where you can discuss with the family, and come to a decision together. I remember when my dad lost his job when layoffs started happening in the early 80s in the engineering world. He worked at power plants, and he was looking for a new job. And there was a job at a nuclear power plant. So this is the early 80s, right after 3 Mile Island happened in Pennsylvania. Or we could move across the state to another job. And so I remember talking about it as a family, staying where we were, but Dad, the risks of him working at a power plant. And at that time, I guess because that was out there, like, I don't remember specifically learning about 3 Mile Island. I was 11, 12, and yet I'm sure the basics of that information was out there. Anyway, so we all, except I don't know if my sister was on board because she had a serious boyfriend and did not want to leave yet. They came to us as a family. And so just sometimes, though, kids just want to be heard, saying, okay, this is what's upsetting you. This is what's frustrating you. just being heard. And it's not that you have to fix it or solve it. Maybe there is some component of it that you can accommodate, because maybe it's not about the moving, but it's about a component of it. That I remember early years of homeschooling, one of my friend, her kid said they wanted to go to school and was trying to figure it out. Well, it turned out they wanted to ride a bus, or they wanted a lunchbox. And I remember with a group of homeschoolers, we took the city bus and went uptown with it, and so the uptown library, to have that experience of riding a bus. And I think for my friend, it was just buying the kid a lunchbox and having those experiences. It wasn't really about going to school. So sometimes our kids just need to feel heard. And so that's a big step. And when you've got a lot on your plate, a lot going on, so we're looking at moving, we're having to clear out clutter, we're having to pack things up. We did a yard sale. We've got all this going on. And then, if someone's coming at you, well, I don't like that, or I don't want to do that. When you're busy, at least for me, it's harder to step back and listen and just let your kid be heard. I did a little bit of that today, even though we got a lot of cleaning up to do. I'm like, she just connecting with me. And I just really want to make that effort to be there and listen. It's just a really powerful tool.
If your dad would have taken that job at nuclear, you could have been the nuclear family. I think that's a classification of families, a nuclear.
It's the immediate family, and that's
So
what we were anyhow. So
you would have been. Now you could
have to work on that.
Label that.
Label.
Yeah, I'll do.
Fine tune
it. Yes. This doesn't quite radiate like it should.
No. It leaves me a little foggy from the smoke.
I'll have a meltdown over it.
It was a very interesting documentary we watched about that.
Yes.
So interesting to check out.
So, it's change is necessary. I think somebody actually, it might have been Neil Donald Walsh, said that change is actually life, because it's a necessary. Well, if you think about it, change happens every second, because that minute wasn't the same as this minute is. And
the only thing consistent is that this will change.
Yes.
Because this is always a new moment, and this is a different moment, and there's always some kind of shift happening.
So if you can learn to accept the change and not beat it up or beat yourself up about it, it can make a big difference. It can change your life.
And I'm just curious, Don, do we have something telling us how long we've been talking? Because usually I look at the clock.
But the clock is blinking because of electricity with it.
But it's really 6 p.m. and I don't know what time we started. We're a little out of sorts. We recorded some tips that'll coming up, and so as you listen to them, know that we've been doing cleanups and pack-ups and
yard sales, and so I think we're coming off kind of a jet lag of stuff to do. So,
which is what brought me to this topic of change, because as we're looking at moving, we're not sure where we're moving to. Because we're paying off some debt with this move, we can't afford a whole lot more than what we have. And so it kind of limits us to looking at surrounding counties and getting the kind of house that we want and not going to too small of a home. And so looking at the pros and cons, Charlotte is a huge city area-wise, and the surrounding areas, and people live all around and come into Charlotte, which creates traffic. And certain areas of town have heavier traffic than others. And we kind of live in the area it's most ideal for that.
So stay on this side is what kind of want to do, but
well, looking at the pros and cons, our daughter wants to live somewhere she can walk somewhere. And that could mean a neighborhood where you walk around, large enough to have new experiences, or that has a pool, or walking to a downtown area that's comfortable, or sidewalks, or being able to be on a greenway and somewhere she likes to bird and go out into nature. And so it doesn't have to look a specific way, yet these are factors that are important to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep falling in love with 100-year-old houses that have been remodeled or partially remodeled. And so we have to weigh the pros and cons of part of the reason this house needs some work. And so by moving and letting someone else invest in it, we do want to go somewhere that doesn't need a ton of work done initially. and we've had issues with mold and things with this house, and we don't want to get into that, versus having a newer home, what might wind up being a smaller home, but then maybe it would have, there's just a lot of factors to consider. And I've realized it can feel like a lot. I suffer with depression that kind of cycles into hypomania. And so my mood, my energy to get things done kind of does this cycle. But making this shift and this change has kind of helped push me forward. It's helped just the excitement of going somewhere new. I guess because I've had that experience in the past, it's kind of fun thinking about a new place, looking at houses. You go on Zillow and Realtor.com or other, just you get to check it out. And
down a rabbit hole, though.
Looking at the pictures. I disappeared for almost 3 hours one day.
Dive.
But it's exciting, and just having that possibility, and for us, it being a very real possibility, is something we have talked about for years, because we moved here. I like this house, but it wasn't like oh, wow, I'm in love with this house. It was, oh, this is bigger. This has more space. We like this area, but it wasn't that, I've heard people say, oh, this is my forever home, or, and I saw the house, I just knew.
Well, you kind of think about it, a lot of the changes we've done, we kind of just make a decision and it happens, kind of thing. We've done, I think, not a lot of that, but we've had quite a few of those, where we just, for some reason, make a decision, we make a call, and then the ball starts rolling.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I brought that up, but maybe we should start wrapping this up.
Okay, I have so much more to say.
Well, I know.
So I wanted to bring up that idea of like the emotional standpoint, that if you're struggling emotionally, if you're feeling stuck, if your kids deal with depression or other things, and it doesn't have to be moving, that's a big change, right? But sometimes taking a little change. I've read about feng shui years ago and rearranging things in your room, and that talks about the positioning and how it affects energy, but sometimes just rearranging a room. Like for our youngest, her older sister moved out on her own, and she moved to her room, and we painted it a color for her. And that was huge for her. It felt like her own then.
Mm-hmm.
It felt, and you can even do smaller changes. Let's take out the pictures down on your wall. You want to put them up differently, or how, doing our routine differently, or this isn't working. What can we do a little bit different now? Or going on a family trip and going somewhere new or different, just taking a day to do something different.
Well, those physical changes can make mental shifts too.
Yeah.
And that's the, and that's, I think, the point.
Right. And so it can work both ways. You can shift the way you're thinking, like you did after you had that experience getting sick in Mississippi. And so realizing you had to change your thinking to change what the experiencing, like you didn't have any friends and you were depressed and then you hated everything. Well, you decided you had to change how you were thinking about it to change what was happening. And sometimes doing the physical change, like, okay, the thought that we made that decision to look at this and to agree with this company to work with them to move. And so we made that decision, and that helped shifted. Sometimes you can do something that helps shift your emotions. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can make a mental change. It can work both ways as well. If that makes sense. But it can be powerful. And like I said, it doesn't have to be big. It can be something simple, like taking your kid to the store and saying, okay, I'm going to let you pick out foods for breakfast for this coming week. Or instead of reading a story tonight before bed, we're going to do shadow puppets on the wall. It can be simple things.
Well, just can be, and if you're a person, I know a couple of people that only wear black, or only wear something different, wear something you normally wouldn't, or just to kind of change things up.
Yeah, reading a different book than you normally would, browsing books at a bookstore or library, just bringing something new into your life, adding to what you're doing. I mean, that's how learning happens. That's how our brain grows. I'm talking about learning with children when they're doing something new, that's engaging the brain. But if you do something over and over again, then it's not new learning. So it's not as engaging in the brain. And that's where puzzles and different things, if it's new and you have to figure it out a new way, that is really growing the brain. And so there's just a lot of connections here with mental health, emotional health, physical health, even, right? When I'm depressed, I know I need to exercise, but then I can't get the energy up to do it. So then I beat myself up because I know what I should do and I'm not doing it. And then because I'm not doing it, I'm sitting around, and then my back gets sore because I'm sitting too much and I'm not moving much. And then because that happens, then I'm in pain. And because I'm in pain, well, then I don't want to walk because I'm in pain.
Sounds like
And then
give the mouse a cookie book.
it's a cycle.
Mhm.
And then my sinuses bother me. And then I'm literally sick. Like you talked about, that used to happen to me a lot when I was younger, a young adult, when we first met, would literally come down with sinus infections or other illnesses and things. And it would kind of like give me permission to be off work and to have a break and to reset. So now, instead of letting it go down that path, I try to take those times to refresh and re-energize. And for me, there's a lot of situational depression that I experience with my ups and downs. It doesn't really follow timeline or seasons, but just we've had a lot of big challenges over the years. And so having something to look forward to, having a little shift. I know when I've set up vacation plans with our timeshare and have that to look forward to, doing new things with our family, getting together at the holidays. The year you had open heart surgery, we had everyone come to us, and it was different, and it was exciting to be me, the one to plan and to do the meals versus my mom. And so there's just such a connection with mental health and change and shift. There's just a lot of ideas here. I need to really spell this out. We've covered a lot of different things, more than as far as summarizing it. It can be helpful to shift your energy, but also engaging your family, looking at the pros and cons. If you are looking to move or something like that, getting your kids' input, making a list of things, prioritizing.
Well, and then following your heart too, following, what you can get all the advice in the world from Zillow and from whatever. Then take that advice and then see what feels right to you.
And if it's a decision you're just making for yourself, do that with yourself.
Well, yeah, but
maybe it's picking out an outfit or a job, but when it affects other people, we've got to take that feeling into consideration.
Yeah.
So what feels like my child, it feels good to have somewhere they can walk. And it doesn't matter if it's a greenway or a city or a neighborhood, right? That feels good to them. And so we need to take that into consideration, and what feels good to you. And so that makes it a little more complex when you have multiple people involved in it. But there's just so much to unpack here and discuss. And this is why we are parent coaches and facilitators, or family coaches, and why we love working with people one-on-one, and why we love doing workshops to help you with all the different resources and skills we have acquired over the years, our own personal experience, and what we've learned from working with others.
Well, and we're dealing with the sandwich generation, which is talking about huge change. Because it's
juggling your needs, your children's needs and responsibilities, and your aging parent or other loved one. And it just adds to those levels of decision making that you have to make. So
that's our podcast for today. We hope you've enjoyed it. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to get comments. We'd like to know if there's a subject that you'd like for us to cover. We'd love for that information.
We love interviewing people. So if you have a particular area that we touch upon or that seems fitting, let us know.
Yes. And, leave us a comment. So if you like what you've heard and you want to find out more about like our coaching program or our webinars and classes that we do, we also have our Tuesday tips. Every Tuesday we have a small podcast where we give a tip for a parent. We also do that by email. All of that can be found on our website, focusedhealthyfamily.com.
You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Gina.focusedhealthyfamily. You can see my blogs where I write about these topics.
And remember, how you speak to your children shapes their future and yours.